Okay. Shabbat Shalom and good morning. Good morning, Michelle and Elias. Dan will be joining us in a minute when the Hashkama Minyan is over. And good morning, David and Brian. Thank you. And good morning, all of you, for tuning in. Let's begin by thanking God for the gift of learning Torah together. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. V'haref na Adonai Eloheinu et divrei Toratcha b'finu u'b'fi amcha beit Yisrael, v'nihye anachnu v'tzatza'enu v'tzatza'ei amcha beit Yisrael, kulanu yod'ei shemecha v'lomdei Toratecha lishma, Baruch atah Adonai hamlamei Torah la'amo Yisrael. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim, v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah. Shabbat shalom, everyone. This morning, I'm so excited for what we're going to do. It's a little bit different. I wanted to play off two texts against one another. One is the song Eleanor Rigby, and we're going to hear the music. And I also want to encourage you to read the lyrics. And here's the basic question I have about Eleanor Rigby. What is her backstory? And here's the basic question. Is Eleanor Rigby about a woman named Eleanor Rigby? It's about her, in which case it's kind of just a sad song. Or is Eleanor Rigby about us? Are we Eleanor Rigby, potentially? Do we have Eleanor Rigby in our life? Are we headed to becoming Eleanor Rigby? Are we one bad break away from being Eleanor Rigby? How many Eleanor Rigbys do we have at Temple Emmanuel today, a year into the pandemic? What's the backstory? How does one become Eleanor Rigby? And then the second text is, how does a community respond to Eleanor Rigby? And that's going to be Halach Ma'anya from the Pesach Seder. So what we're going to do is, first, I'm going to ask Brian Lefsky, our indefatigable webmaster, Zoom master, etc., to play Eleanor Rigby. Brian, please. And please take a look at the lyrics, because we're actually going to literally unpack the lyrics after we hear the music. Brian, thank you. So let me begin by asking Elias, the Wesley Gardensworth Senior Cantor at Temple Emmanuel. Elias, what do you think of that song? First of all, just because you're really a music person, you make song for that's your soul. What do you think of the song, and what does it do to you emotionally?
Well, I'm sorry, but I have to say, everybody, you'll forgive me. You know, the sermon nobody will hear and darming his socks. I thought about you, Wes, immediately. But then
Thanks a
I
lot,
hear
Elias.
that, preparing your socks the night before for
Yeah,
the Talmud class. Eh, Anyways, so this is such a special song, and I mean, you can read it here. It's the first time that Lennon, McCartney, Harrison, and Starr didn't play an instrument for a song.
it's the first time. The what?
That they didn't play an instrument for the song. The
Okay,
song is them doing the vocals, and it's all strings.
okay,
Okay, strings. They had like three violins, two violas, two cellos. That's highly unusual, and it was also very highly unusual. I wasn't alive then, but very highly unusual because always the Beatles songs were like pop peppy and about love and about stuff, and this was in a way a depressing song,
right,
very depressing song. I love how the music melodically it's done, and the beauty of it is just very beautiful, and the harmonies. The message it's on the other side. It's like so sad, and it's a story actually about two lonely people. Because let's not forget about Father Mackenzie
right.
who darned his socks.
Yes, we'll get to that. But can you say a word because you're the music guy here? What's the meaning of the strings, the violin, the cello, and the fact that you brought that to the conversation that it's all strings, and how does that reinforce the meaning and the message of the song?
I'm not so sure it reinforces the meaning of the message. What they did something that it was very unusual for the day, which is the Beatles started like a rock and roll band, and then sort of going to pop, and then they were experimenting more with music and with different
Yeah,
types of sounds, and this reflects the era, 66. Um, it's interesting because McCartney said that he sat down in the piano and started to do a few chords and this and that, and then they thought about this idea of bringing the strings to sort of making it more like a classical music, like more
mm,
intense, and it's not a straight line. They don't the violins. If you hear, it's like like something that is, in a way, punching your heart.
punching your heart. So, Michelle, speaking of punching your heart, what's the message of the song?
Yeah, before I get there, can I ask you, Cantor, is there a musical name for this kind of a song that has an upbeat melody but a sad lyrics, or sad lyrics, or upbeat lyrics but sad melody? Because I feel like we hear that throughout our liturgy at times where we'll say something like, if you think about in the Birkat Hamazon, right? We're talking about babies' heads being, I sat by the waters of Babylon and we're
Right, right.
smashing heads, and we're like da 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 da
Or
da da. We're
na
like, yeah, or not
Haiti
not
comes a
Haiti is a
country. Yeah,
perfect
right,
example, right? That
right.
we have this sense that there's this really incredibly sad message, and we have a relatively upbeat melody. There's no name for that phenomenon?
I don't think there is a name for that. It's just a matter of who decides to write and what the feelings they bring into the composition and how they see themselves, and how they interpret their song.
By the way,
Not necessarily has to do with the lyrics.
Right.
not
I
not to get
find
off
what's
the
You know,
rails here,
yeah.
but
it
dear,
comes to mind.
Yeah, exactly.
yeah, yeah.
Right.
Or think about, I mean, this is a little bit pre-pandemic, but think about Dear Evan Hansen.
Yeah.
But Dear Evan Hansen, the suicidal kid, and the song is very bouncy, jouncy, upbeat, and the lyrics are "I want to kill myself."
Yeah. So if
Right.
there's
This
So
not a
song,
name
but
for
this
that,
song
there
is
should be.
Rabbi Michelle Robinson. This song is it's not like that. You know,
I actually
it's
think
a
it.
beautiful song, but it's not an upbeat song.
it's a haunting
Oh,
song. But
it.
anyway, can we just talk about the message, Michelle? What's the message
Yes.
of the song?
So I actually find that message to be paralleled in the sort of upbeat feeling that you get from the music, da 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 da, like that, together with the sadness and the intensity of the loneliness. In that, so often when we are alone and we're lonely, the world is kind of marching on without us, and they're
Mm.
in their own happy pace all around, and your loneliness is magnified by the fact that you are experiencing it in a way that feels like you're alone.
So let me just pick up on that. I want to do a very, Jewish Theological Seminary textual analysis, Talmud class move, which is to put two lines under the microscope. Okay. And what you're saying is that there's this creative dissonance between sad and upbeat lyrics, and it is to enforce that the world goes around you, even though you're alone and lonely and miserable. So here's two lines I want to ask you all to think about. Picks up the rice in the church where a wedding has been. That's the first one. And then wearing the face that she keeps in a jar by the door. That's the second one. So picks up the rice in the church where a wedding has been. What is that?
I mean, for me, it's a magnification of exactly this tension, which is that, I mean, how many of us have been at simchas and, there's the hora dancing and there's all that's going on and you feel like you don't quite belong. Maybe you've had a
Mm,
loss, or maybe you're struggling with a job or with a relationship and you can't quite get yourself into that hora dance, but
mm.
you got to get into the hora, so you kind of put on the shiny face
So
and
right. So she's not
clasp
Eleanor
hands.
Rigby is not a bride at this wedding. She's
I
on the
mean,
outside of this wedding.
that's my
Right. She's on
interpretation.
the outside of this wedding. Lord Dan Nesson or Elias, what do you guys have a view on this rice line?
I have a couple of things. First of all, I was thinking about initially the fact that the Beatles were like in their very early 20s when they write this song. And people in their early 20s, well, now in pandemic, kids are lonely. But beforehand, um, there was not this gigantic sense of loneliness, that people have. And I thought it's just an interesting thing that these very young musicians who have
Rock stars,
rock
literally.
star, yes, these very young rock stars who have absolutely everything going for them, look around them and and Paul McCartney and John Lennon, absolute geniuses, looking around them and seeing, look at the world,
Mm,
everybody. Basically, he's saying the human condition. They're saying the human condition is that no matter how much we are together, in our heads and in our hearts, in essence, we're all alone. I mean, I was just thinking like how sad it is to think that during the pandemic that people die alone. They can't be with their families, and this is the sense of loneliness that these musicians had at this early age is the sense of understanding the world and the human condition is
mm.
really profound.
That's
It's
a
really
really
profound.
beautiful point.
Yeah.
Here they are, the opposite of alone and the opposite of lonely, and they have this preternatural connection to the reality of a loneliness that they don't themselves experience.
Right.
Or
Right.
or perhaps they do. I mean, you asked the question, is she the bride or is she not the bride?
Right,
You could see these words from either perspective, and indeed they have. If you watch some of the music videos that have been created over time by fans
right,
of this song, one of the descriptions puts her as the bride, but she's no longer that young bride and
right,
she's moving on, and Father Mackenzie, who is, perhaps
right,
even her partner, and
right.
they're
We'll get to Father
darning
Mackenzie.
socks, right? And they're darning, and this idea of how even sometimes when you're in the prime of your life and when you're experiencing these things as we move through the cycle of our lives, those all can become losses.
Yeah. So, Dan, let me just go to you. Wearing the face that she keeps in a jar by the door. Lord Dan Nesson, what do you do with that?
Um, I think this is all about makeup, but makeup in the sense that it's the mask that we wear,
Mm,
not the blue masks that we're wearing, but the mask that we wear in public. Because she could step out onto the street and no one knows that she's the loneliest person. She could be, chit chatting with everybody on the street.
so,
We don't know that.
in other words, so that's like, hey, Eleanor, how are you? I'm fabulous. There's
Right.
never better. I'm great. I'm
A
great. How are
facade,
you?
a facade.
A facade,
Facade.
right?
Yeah.
So
Facade.
that's the
Yeah.
facade. That's the I'm fab. I'm fab. It's wonderful, amazing.
Right.
How I was great, and inside she's not so great.
Right.
Yeah, and I like. I'm sorry, Lord. Are you done? So I like what it says. Right after picking up the rice. To me, picking up the rice is just not a metaphor. It's actually what she does, an action. Picking up the rice. She's the person who cleans in the church. To me, that's how I
Mm,
see her.
Hmm.
And living a dream. Living a dream. Like she feels like she's part of that wedding, but she's not.
Hmm.
And then the other part is the facade, and the facade not only applies to lonely people but to sad people as well.
right.
When we are very sad, and how many times we in our own lives are sad, and we have to come here and do our best face.
Right.
You know, I mean, some people get upset about that, they say, no, but you should be able to show your emotions at the synagogue. It's not like that. You know, when your mom died, or when my dad passed away, we had to do the best we can here with that sadness.
Yeah.
And there were celebrations, there were bar
Oh
mitzvahs, there
yeah.
was
My
there was
mom
everything
died on day one of Rosh Hashanah, and I had to go and do the contemporary service on
with
day
me.
two of Rosh
I
Hashanah.
remember that.
And I remember I was hugging you at the bima because I basically needed your strength to get through that service. I remember that. I remember I was holding you because my mom had just died, and there were like this is pre-pandemic 700 people in in the Adelson Community Hall, and then we had a Rosh Hashanah service to do. Yeah, yeah. Um, I have a question though. What? So they asked these two questions: all the lonely people, where do they all come from? And all the lonely people, where do they all belong? Does the song answer these questions?
No,
No.
definitely.
No. Okay. Let's talk then about. Let's talk about. We'll get to your own sense of this, but um, Father McKenzie, what? How did you guys relate? You know, he's clergy and we're clergy. He's clergy to a lonely person in a lonely time. We're clergy in a pandemic. How did you connect with Father McKenzie?
So I just pictured him similar to what Elias just said. You know, someone who stands in front of his congregation and is the pillar of strength, and is the pillar of yeah, the pillar of the community, the pillar of, of strength, and then, but you know, but he's you picture him, he's wiping the dirt off of his hands. He's just, it's a moment of great sadness, and it's the sadness that again we oftentimes as clergy can't show, or try not to show in moments of sadness, and and I think that he's a person who is trying to do his best to be there for everybody, uh, at the at the expense of his own soul.
Mm. So,
I mean, I
And
just hope that Father Mackenzie lives in an era of COVID and not in an era of no COVID, because doing a sermon for 600 people and nobody listens to you is much worse than to do it with an empty
but
sanctuary.
I actually think that that's such. I love this song. One of the great brilliances that they brought to this the writing of these words is how really complex they are and how they can be looked at from multiple directions, because of course you could imagine Father Mackenzie, who's sort of that beaten down. Think back to an era when people didn't really want to go to church. The young people, all of their fans, the Beatles fans, were not thrilled to go to church, and in fact they may be talking about an empty church where this dutiful pastor is coming and he's continuing to do this in a lonely lockdown way. Or they could actually be talking about there could be 600 people there, Elias, and even though there's the sermon and even though it's being delivered, it's not hitting, right? People aren't hearing
we've all
it,
done
and
that.
therefore
Yeah.
there's the existential loneliness that he's carrying of I'm engaged in something which is so profoundly meaningful to me,
And not
and
shared.
and I'm alone. My people aren't with me in this. I mean, I
Right.
think about the ways in which when I used to insist that people have kosher celebrations for their weddings. That was what
Right.
I was taught in
Right.
rabbinical school, right? You come and you have a kosher ceremony, and people would look at me like I had six heads.
Right.
And there is a loneliness
Yeah.
about that doesn't have to do with who's in the church or who's in the
Right.
shul, but if you're able to connect the message.
So I want before we head to the Seder and the Haggadah, I want to turn to me to the central question here, which is who is Eleanor Rigby? And is this song about a woman named Eleanor Rigby, real or mythological, right? Metaphorical or historical, it doesn't matter. But is it about her or is it about us? That's the key question. Are we Eleanor Rigby? Are we a step away? Are we a bad break away from Eleanor Rigby? And what's the backstory? Like, why is it that Eleanor Rigby has nobody at her funeral? Where's Eleanor Rigby's brothers? Where's Eleanor Rigby's sisters? Where's Eleanor Rigby's friends? Where's Eleanor Rigby's, neighbors? Where are Eleanor Rigby's the people that knew her from grade school? Where are the people in her life? How did she get to be, buried along with her name? And that is the backstory. And of course, that's the question the song leaves us with. But it's time to do a midrash on Eleanor Rigby. What's the backstory on Eleanor Rigby? Lord Dan Nessen.
Okay. Sorry. Thank you. I was actually watching some videos online of Paul McCartney talking about this song, and one of the things that he said was when he was a kid, when he was really young, he used to hang out in this. It's like where he lived is like low income housing kind of thing, and he said there were a lot of these older ladies that he would just sit around and kibitz with and learn their stories. So in some sense, Eleanor Rigby is a composite of real people, and I think in another sense, Eleanor Rigby is a composite of something that's part of all of us. I think it's also, I think they're expressing here a fear that they're going that the McCartney is expressing a fear that he's going to die alone and be buried alone, in which that we all do in some respect, but that there's a reality to the world that no matter how many people actually come to your funeral, um, that no matter how many people are there, that in essence that when you're gone, and that the average person doesn't really mostly affect the world.
Mm.
So I think he's it's really I don't know, I'm trying to find the right adjective, but it's really kind of a sad look at the human condition, at the world. But I think in a certain way, Eleanor Rigby represents every person. Um,
Okay. Elias?
on that
Uh, it comes to mind a couple of experiences that I had in my 20s in Argentina. So, to do a long story short, in Argentina, synagogues don't have their own cemetery. There are like 3 big cemeteries, and every synagogue go there. So for 2 years, I was the official Hazan at one of the cemeteries. That meant that I was there, and people will come, non-affiliated people, the majority of them, they will come, and I will do the funeral. All right, and so twice happened something to me that I never seen before and never seen after that,
Mm.
which was that I was expecting the cars to arrive, and I see the black funeral home car coming, and that was the only one. There was a casket with a person, nobody else.
Mm. Eleanor
Yeah.
Rigby.
Eleanor Rigby. And I remember walking down the path to do the burial. I was behind. The cart was pushed by 3 guys, and I was singing, the psalm that we do, the 7 steps.
You were Father McKenzie.
Yes, I
You were
was
Father
doing
McKenzie.
that. I was doing that. I did that twice, and I remember I couldn't sleep that night, and I thought, how is it possible that she had nobody? There are different things in life that could happen. She had relatives. She was estranged from her relatives. She had relatives. The relatives don't close by. They don't have the means to travel to be with her. Maybe she wasn't such a pleasant woman, or man didn't have enough friends. There are reasons for that, but it was so sad. It was
Wow.
so unbelievably sad, and I, in a way, I myself, I felt good about it because I really thought about doing the mitzvah. That I was there with her until the last time, and it's even more important to the mitzvah when you always say when nobody's looking. And but it was such a powerful experience. So to me, this song reflects, one of the cruel realities of life.
I really resonate with your story because we've done the equivalent, one or two people at the graveside, but people who were not the immediate mourners who have come, and that was before COVID. And now we have this COVID reality where in some sense, all of us, particularly at the beginning, when they weren't allowing family members to have to sit in your car. If you were lucky, you could sit in your car and watch. And then there we were at the graveside kind of trying to represent. And it's so antithetical. One of the amazing gifts of our Jewish tradition is they say that, when you pass away, the minyan, the community has to be there for you. That is a critical mitzvah, that even if you were Eleanor Rigby in life, that you should never be that. You can never be that, because your Jewish community should be surrounding you
Right.
with people who will honor you. If you don't have someone who's a direct descendant to say Kaddish, then somebody in the community would take that on. And I think one of the most profound things about this song is not just the question of, all the lonely people, where do they come from? Where do they belong? But the call that comes out, and I read in this beautiful uh, stuff that it's Ringo's edition of all. Look at all the lonely people. Look, recognize them,
Right.
see them. Look at all the lonely people. It's not just a wondering. It is in some ways a command,
A
and
call to action.
it's a call to action, and it's a call to action that our tradition actually asks us repeatedly and through a structure of mitzvot to heed, to
Right.
say we can't leave a lonely person
Right.
to an Eleanor Rigby funeral.
So, okay, so I want to pivot to that in a minute, because I think in many ways, halach ma'anya is our response to Ringo's interpretation of, look at all the lonely people, look and do, look and care, look and act, not just look and, right, throw up your hands. But before we do, I want to just add one extra dimension to the song that hasn't been said yet. I find it not only a sad song and a haunting song, I find it personally a terrifying song. Terrifying. Because I feel like the basic resonance of the song is we are all Eleanor Rigby. You could be married, to Lorena for 50 years, 60 years, 70 years. And then Mikey is off somewhere doing his thing, and David is a rock star literally traveling the world, right? And you're right, and you get they're busy and they've got their own lives and they're traveling, and your longtime spouse dies. You're now Eleanor Rigby. You're now Eleanor Rigby, right? And in our mobile society, where our kids and grandkids live in different cities, right? I live different city than my parents, and Shira lives different city from her parents, and you live in a different city from your parents, and you live in a different city from your parents, right? Right, and that's good, and that's how it should be, right? Right, but that means that you want to see your mother, you got to get on a plane and go to Buenos Aires, and it's 20 hours from door to door, right? So we're all in this mobile society, which means that it's not hard to imagine. And by the way, we've all done, especially pre-pandemic, we've all been to the homes of somebody who was married for 50, 60, 70 years and they buried their spouse. And we've all been there. And you see, and what is harder and what is sadder than you go to the home where two used to live and they've lived for 60 years, 70 years, and now one lives. And you can just literally feel the emptiness. It's like it's palpable, and no villains in this drama. But the kids have their own lives, and they live in different cities, and the grandkids have their own lives, and they're so busy. They're so busy. They're so busy. They're so busy. They're so busy, and you're so alone. We have Eleanor Rigby, so that's why it's a terrifying song, because it's not about her. It is just totally, totally, totally about us. So now how does the Haggadah respond to Ringo Starr's Perush? Look at all the lonely people. So take a look, folks, at Halach Ma'anya, which is in the Haggadah. And this is just so interesting. I just want to start by noting the two contradictions that I put in the teaser that I've always wondered about, right? This is a song of invitation, that we wanna look at all the lonely people. If you don't have a seder, we want you at our seder table. So why is it offered in a language that no one understands? Who understands kol dich pinyete v'yecho kol yitzrich yete v'yifsach? Nobody. Exactly, nobody understands that. And second, what does it mean that you offer it only around the seder table to people who are already there, or on the Zoom call to people who are already connected to your call? But the actual Eleanor Rigby's in our world,
Yeah.
who aren't at your Seder table, who aren't on your Zoom call, number one, they're not there to hear it, and if they were, it's in Aramaic, which they don't understand. So, can you guys just tackle these two contradictions at the outset of the prayer?
So first of all, I have to do a B'Shem Omro because I was reading too quickly. Star comes after the Lonely People, and apparently George Harrison is responsible for look at all the lonely
Okay.
people. So in good Jewish tradition,
Okay.
B'Shem Omro. But but secondly, I I think that we actually have this incredible tension in our Seder, that there's something actually wrong about our Seder. And I had a professor in Jerusalem when I had the blessing of learning up at Schechter that he said he actually would stop his Seder at this point in time and roam around the streets of Jerusalem until he could find somebody who needed to come to a Seder, and then would bring him home or her home, because actually he felt like these words are there for a reason and a purpose. And if we're sitting and ignoring them, we can't actually continue our Seders. We haven't done it properly. And so, he would literally make them true. Go find somebody in need and bring them to your Seder table year after year. His wife did not love this practice because they had to wait on serving the Seder for an awfully long time. But if you could imagine, like, what would that look like today? In all the years that I've held that, I've heard that lesson, and I've never stopped my Seder and walked around to look
And
for
who
people
would
who
do
need
that?
a Seder.
Right. So, I mean, it's a very noble move, but it's just a kind of
Can I?
it's an extreme move that most of us would not do. Who's going to walk around Newton looking right?
Mhm.
So,
I
but
see.
why does this passage and why does the Haggadah put us in the position of this self contradiction?
Uh, so a couple of things. I love you, Wes. I love you very much. You are the best. But I have to say, Aramaic is not that far out from Hebrew. So
Okay.
if you don't understand Aramaic, that means you don't understand Hebrew. So to some people, Hebrew will be more foreigner than in the
Okay.
same category of Aramaic. Anyways, so I want to bring a personal story, and I hope my wife is okay with this. This morning I woke up, and we were having breakfast together, and she asked me what the Talmud class was about, and I mentioned Eleanor Rigby and then Al Ahmaniya, and then I said to her, I don't think I ever done that in my life, to bring somebody from outside, an unknown person or somebody who I know who is lonely, to invite them to my Seder. And it's so sad. And she said to me, my dad used to do that. And I said, yeah, I remember that, but can you tell me more? And she said, her dad unfortunately only lived 46 years. He passed away of cancer. And he used to bring people from the synagogue who had nowhere to go on the spot. What are you doing tonight? I don't have any family. I don't do anything. Come with me. And Susanna will smile and welcome them to their house. And that was a tradition in the family. And I said to her, why did she do that? Why did he do that? He was such a nice person. He was such a nice person. And interesting enough, they belong to a German Jewish synagogue where I actually met Lorraine. I was the cantor, but they started belonging there before. And that synagogue had a lot of Holocaust survivors, completely lonely, completely without anybody. And there was one woman who was in the concentration camp, and he would bring her all the time. And it's such a beautiful story, and so close to me. And I never met Lauren as that. It was so sad. But
Are Mikey or David named for him?
yes, Mikey.
Mikey.
His name was Miguel in Spanish, which is Michael in English.
Wow. Wow.
So
Lord?
I'm thinking about a couple things. Just backtracking a tiny bit, when we say look at all the lonely people, and then also halachma, that we invite people. It seems to me that we in our lives will, unless we're pushed into it, that we ignore people. We have to be told, look at the lonely people. We have to be told, invite people. So that it's again, it's like we're also insular. Like you said, how many of us actually invited strangers that we know don't have a place to go to our seders? Probably more than we think, but not everybody does that. And the other thing is that, this invitation at the beginning of the Seder. So, I mean, if you think historically of how the Seder began, historically, this would have been something that you would do in advance. You wouldn't stop your Seder that night. You would in advance you'd say, oh, I know these like 6 or 7 or 5 whatever people that have no place to go. I'm going to invite them. And some of these things that we do became formulaic, but they actually, but it predated. It was predated that they actually were actions that were taken,
Right.
in advance. So
Can
Can
I
I, can I
just
say
Yeah.
something? I need to
Yeah.
say something that
Yeah.
it's always in my head, but I need to say it. So I went yesterday, as soon as we finished our meetings yesterday here, my tradition is I go to Blackers for the challah. And because of the pandemic, people make a line outside. I was literally 30 minutes waiting to buy challah.
But it's the best line in town because you
Yes.
see everybody.
It depends if you're a dog or a cat. anyways, 30 minutes standing in line to buy challah. And then I thought, can you imagine if you would do a Seder with challah? People will make a line to come to your house. But with matzah, it's like, it's an easy mitzvah to do. Come and eat matzah at my house. It's delicious.
So, Michelle,
So,
can I ask
yeah.
you a dog cat question? Because you're the ultimate dog. I mean, you just love all people.
Just
all
so
the time.
everybody understands what they're talking about, Rabbi Brad Artson once gave a sermon about dog rabbis versus cat rabbis, and the cat rabbis are the ones who are happy in their studies with their books, and the dog rabbis are the ones who love people and need people.
Right, and that's you. So here's my question, and I just wanted to surface a real issue because, um, at one level, who could argue with inviting Eleanor Rigby to your Seder? Okay? But here's the practical problem that I have with that. It's such a beautiful moral thing to do. But, over the years, back, and especially in the day when we used to have Seders, right? Shira and I would invite folks who were Eleanor Rigby, okay? And the truth is, it does disrupt the chemistry and connectivity of a Seder. Let's say it's, you and Mike and Maya and Noah and Eli and Benjamin
And you keep
and
going
Eleanor
because
Rigby
she has so many
and
family.
Eleanor Rigby. And Eleanor Rigby. So the chemistry and conversation that you would have with Eleanor Rigby is just very different. And in some ways, once you put Eleanor Rigby around your table or on your Zoom call, right, you have to now, it just completely alters the character of that conversation. Can you speak to that?
I don't know that I can speak directly to that, but I can say that um, isn't that kind of the point, right? You can have dinner with your family any night of any week. And thank God during the pandemic, one of the blessings has been for many of us that we have. Right? On Pesach, you're asked to expand a curriculum for your family about what's important in life and to deal with the deep issues and the fundamental questions of what makes a life worth living. What is your relationship with God about? What is, the whole Manishtana is about getting kids to engage in these questions about what does redemption look like and how can I be part of helping to make it happen? And that feels to me like you have a literal representation of what that looks like when you invite someone else into the Seder and give them the space to share their truth about the texts that you're studying.
Get out of your comfort zone.
Get out of your comfort zone. Be able to learn something and grow. The whole night is about learning.
Right. So
And-
so if you actually take these lines seriously,
Yeah.
and if you do it, right, then what you're inviting is not just Eleanor Rigby, a new person, but you're also inviting a growth opportunity
A growth opportunity. And I mean, what's so
and a
interesting.
learning opportunity and a discomfort opportunity.
Correct. And actually, that's part of the point. We're supposed to be uncomfortable, right? And we're supposed to do things that are different on that
Right.
night to get us to ask and to think about different questions in different ways.
Right.
And I mean, to me, what's really interesting about the article you shared with us, Wes, is that there's this whole debate, like, is Eleanor Rigby real? Right. And in fact, people have hunted down her grave, and Eleanor Rigby is real. Like, there was an actual Eleanor Rigby and there is a grave and all of that. But Paul McCartney says, but that's not, I mean, go ahead, buy the memorabilia if you want, but like, that's not what I meant.
Right.
I was actually doing a composite. I was trying to give you a metaphor. And I think that applied to our halachmania is another move that we can make. We can insist as my professor did in Jerusalem, on the literal move. There is a Eleanor Rigby. I have seen her grave, right?
Right.
And therefore, halach manya is real. I need to go and bring in people to my Seder. That is a mitzvah. And by the way, I mean, our tradition would tell us bringing in people to our Seders actually is a mitzvah. The original template on which it is based, that we all need to share the Pesach offering, you couldn't do that with only one family. You needed to bring people in order to do that. And that's the concrete manifestation. But there's also a metaphorical piece of what Paul McCartney is trying to say. It's like, guys, do halach manya. There are lots of ways to do it. You don't necessarily have to literally have a homeless or poor or disadvantaged person in your home in order to do this, although that's nice. But you also can do the mitzvah of providing a Pesach meal. You can go out and donate to a charity which helps people to make sure that they have somewhere safe to be. And there are lots of ways to do halach manya in life and in the world. And I think both models are so important because you're going to resonate with one sometimes and one another, and we need both.
So let me I want to just end with a Devar Torah from Rav Soloveitchik, and then with a call to action. The Devar Torah from Rav Soloveitchik is, the Rav notes that if you look at the lines, let all who are hungry come and eat, let all who are in need come and share the Pesach meal, he notes that those speak to different issues. The first is somebody who's hungry physically, like they have food insecurity. They just need a meal. But then he notes, the Rav does, that all who are in need come and share the Pesach meal is they have plenty of food in their cupboard. It's not that they're missing protein and grain or matzah or rice or whatever, vegetables. They have food. What they don't have is people to eat it with. It's not what you eat, it's who you eat it with. And the second line is about who you eat it with. And so here's the call that I would love to make in the name of members of our shul who are on this, Bob Kahn and Wendy Landon, and a bunch of our lay leaders who have spearheaded this beautiful drive. Could we be a congregation where there are no lonely people on either the first or the second night of the Pesach Seder? That's a simple question. Could we be a congregation where there's not a single lonely person, not one lonely person, not one lonely person on either night one or night two of Pesach, because everybody has a Seder to attend. Of course, we're in the pandemic, we all know this, so that will mean in most cases attending on Zoom. But so here's the call that I would like to ask all of us to get behind. The big goal: no lonely people on Pesach, no Eleanor Rigby on Pesach. And so if you would be open to inviting another person to your Zoom Seder with all the discomfort, and now you have another voice and somebody you don't know and another person to attend to, and it's a growth opportunity and it's disruptive and it's awkward, but it's important and it's a mitzvah and it's kind of the whole point. If you're open to doing that, send an email to me or to the temple. We sent an email earlier in the week to Wendy Landon or to Aaron Mosley that you're prepared to host. And if you are by yourself and you're going to just like not do Pesach, just not have a first Seder or not have a second Seder. Of course, the second Seder, we have the community Seder anyway that Elias and Michelle do every year.
With a new innovation is that we have a Zoom table for you to attend. So even if you have a family that you want to put together at your Zoom table on the second night, you can also indicate that you're open to adding in somebody who doesn't have a table. And we also create tables. So if you don't have a table, we will create a table of lots of people who can connect and meet each other. And in past years, that's been a really wonderful experience.
Beautiful. So that's night two. But night one, if you don't have a Seder, and let's say, okay, I'm going to do night two, I'll do the communal Seder night two. But night one, don't let night one go by yourself. Let us know. Email me, email Wendy Landon, email Aaron Mosley, email the temple office. Hey, I could actually use a Seder. We want to make sure that we actually look at all the lonely people, because that is all of us. That's all of us. That's not somebody else. That's all of us. That's us X years from now. That's us. All it takes is one bad break. All it takes is your spouse dies. All it takes is your kids and grandkids move out of town. We are Eleanor Rigby, so let's take care of one another. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.